Perfect. We're on. Great.
Awesome.
Okay. So for November Prevention and Health Promotion Convos, Allie, you are going to tell us about the journey to EQFit.
Yeah, I love it. Okay,
Okay.
so I guess I'll start at the beginning. When I got involved with the APHPT, which was really through the APHPT cert course, my whole lens of how I saw, my prevention practice really unfolding from the very beginning was solely in the employer space. That was really the large emphasis of that course, especially at that point early on. And I saw a lot of potential, and that excited me. But, that's a big beast and takes a lot of time and a lot of relationship building, particularly in the area that I'm in. I'm not from here, so I had to really, spend a lot of time building a network. And in the interim of that, from when I kind of moved, back from New Jersey after spending some time with Proactivity to where I live in North Carolina, while I was trying to really figure out what, the employer client space meant for me and sending a million cold emails and cold calls and trying to build relationships, I needed not only cash flow to keep my business alive, but I needed to feel a sense of I was doing the work that I wanted to do, even if it was on a small scale. I looked a ton of different ways, but I came up with this idea that I've ridden my entire life since I was 6 years old, rode really competitively from the time I was in sixth grade through high school, and then rode on a NCAA, a Division I team in college. And so, equestrian and the sport of equestrian has been a part of my life forever. It's how I met my husband. He's a horse trainer. And so it was at that point still a really huge part of my life. And so I kind of came to this realization that I had this population that I knew maybe better than anybody else in my profession in that world that needed health in a really meaningful way. At the horse shows, many of the trainers, like if they had a musculoskeletal ache or pain, were going to the vet to get, injected in some body part or to get some, horse medication that they could squirt in their drink. Like that was kind of the standard of healthcare because access wasn't there. Horse trainers, many of them either have terrible health insurance or no health insurance at all. And health is not a major priority in the population generally. So kind of my first, I guess, idea was to try to bring the model that I had seen at base camp, which if you've never heard of base camp or never, been to base camp, that's kind of like the home base location of Proactivity. It also houses the not-for-profit kind of base camp mothership that is the sort of sister or parent organization of APHPT. But base camp really is like the testing grounds, the training grounds for what we do with our populations. And it sort of hit me as I was thinking about what am I going to do in this phase of my business's development that I could take the population health things that I had learned in the CERT course and that I was trying to apply to employer populations and merge that with the population and individual health pieces I saw at base camp and really try to take that model to where the people are, which for me was at horse shows.
Well, let me interrupt you right there because I don't think people understand this about EQFit and proactivity. Because everybody thinks proactivity is the holy grail of population health, and it's a model that that gets shared. But proactivity didn't come to you and say you're going to do EQFit, did they? No, like no one at Proactivity rides a horse, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like
No.
I just really want to like this was not this was you realizing this is your population. Yeah.
So here's how it went. There's a big horse show that we go to for the month of October traditionally for the entire month. It's called the All-American Quarter Horse Congress. It's a month long. You're there for a month plus. It is the worst living conditions for humans you could possibly imagine. Nobody sleeps, like 2 to 4 hours a night is max because you're up all night riding and preparing. And then you show all day, you're in kind of close quarters, breathing in, horse urine smells that have been fermenting for a month. So it's pretty tough on the human body. And access to like healthy food is very limited. It's kind of a lot of fair food. Nobody's exercising, like everybody's all off the routine, and everybody leaves like super sick. And so we were kind of gearing up for that. And I had this idea to take base camp as we know it, like health, fitness, on-site physical therapy, to the Congress, because I'm like, this is where we want to be our best. Like, this is, being a Congress champion is a huge accomplishment because it's so hard. And so I was like, well, we want to be our best there, but we're living at our worst. Why not take something that allows people to maybe live a little closer to their best, so that they can perform at a higher level? And so I called Eric up and I said, hey, I want to, I've got this idea. I want to kind of take base camp and set it up at Congress. And he's like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, what does that mean? And so I explained it, and he's like, I mean, it sounds cool, but like, what's that, look like? What's that cost? Yeah, all this stuff. And I'm like, I have no idea, but I'm just thinking like, take my barbell and set up shop somewhere in a corner and, host some group fitness and do on-site physical therapy. And, I had found this group that did, healthy deliverable meals, like link up with them so that people could get healthy meals. And he's like, I mean, this sounds crazy, but if you can figure out how to pull it off, like, go for it. And long story short, I went for it, despite I had a lot of good support, particularly from a family friend that I've known forever. That was really adamant about me doing it and really helped me to pull it off. But then Eric was like, I got to see this because I can't even envision what you're talking about. And he came so he bought a ticket to fly into Congress for 2 days to kind of watch what was happening. And he's like, I've never seen anything like this. First, I was like lugging my PT treatment table a half a mile across the fairgrounds every time to go treat people at different places. I had a big gym set up in like a upper annex of a building, was leading group fitness classes. And then down below us was equestrian competitions going on all day. So it was, productivity. Nobody told me to do this. In fact, nobody had any idea what I was doing when I started it, but that was really how it was born. And it's just kind of went through many evolutions. That was now 3 years ago. It's went through many evolutions since then.
So let's talk about those evolutions, because I think people forget about the journey, and the point of these conversations is to teach people about the journey. So what I hear first of all is that you just had an idea and you were unafraid to give it a try. So it's important to maybe comment that while your husband Jake was at the Congress, he was working, like he wasn't like helping you. Like you're lugging everything around and doing it. And like he's still doing his job. And then Eric didn't know what he was even looking at. So it's not like you had constant feedback. Like, so you're doing something, it's either working or not working, and then you're pivoting or redesigning. So
exactly.
So when you think about that first one, where is it now? Like, what do you do now? Like, what did you learn that didn't work? And what do you do now?
So it's evolved a lot. I think the biggest thing that I learned that didn't work was that EQFit was born out of really a big desire to be able to do what I love, which is go to horse shows and be engaged. And still, at that point I wasn't competing, but now I'm competing. And so to be able to go and do what I love, and honestly take away the guilt of feeling like I was just blowing off, work for, a week or 2 weeks at a time. Yeah. So a lot of it was really born out of both the mission of like, I feel like this is a population that needs health and I feel like I can help deliver it. And I want to be able to, I want to be able to enjoy this part of my life. It's important for me. It's important for my mental health. It's important for my relationship. So one thing that I learned from that Congress is that I didn't want to be like, I wanted it to be a balance between being able to enjoy that world and being able to work and meet the need. And it was not balanced. At that show, I was there to like give it that. I wasn't showing. I was there to give it everything that I had and see if it was going to be viable in the market. So there was zero balance. I was tied to my gym space for most of the day. I'd sneak out and watch my husband's show and then go right back. I was really busy traveling around to different people.
So you're still
around the grounds.
So you're still trapped in your job, even though you were in an environment that, see, I don't think people realize that. They say, oh, I'm going on site, but then they feel just as trapped on site as they do in the clinic. So that's profound. Okay.
Yeah, because now, I said there's very little access. Well, now there's a resource. Now everybody, word starts to get out what you're doing and what you can help with. And then you have a flood of people, needing you. And I realized like, that's not really the role I want to be in. Like, I don't want to be people's like fixer, I don't want to be like piecing them back together for the show, and find myself spread too thin. And so EQFit has really evolved over a course of time. We were laughing before we started the call. Perry came to one of my shows in Georgia, and I wasn't licensed in Georgia, partially intentionally because I didn't want to be treating people because I wanted to be able to focus on my horse. And so Perry treated some of my EQFit clients that needed treating at the show. But at that show, it was sort of a pivotal moment for EQFit because Perry was like, you don't want to be treating this much. Like, why are you treating, why are you trying to treat all these people? Like, what do you want EQFit to be? And I said, I really want it to like change the trajectory of the future of health and how we view ourselves, like really equestrians viewing themselves as athletes and thus getting the benefits of when we treat our body and minds as athletes. And so EQFit shifted from very like treatment heavy Onsite at horse shows treating to really much more like fitness and prevention and health and wellness in a virtual space. And then, still, providing what's needed for my client base at horse shows, but it being a lot more about like, no, we're a community, whether we're at the horse show together or whether we're preparing in between. And it's become, really fulfilling for me. And so I don't know if that answers the question.
No, it does. It does. Because I do remember being at that show. And I remember thinking, because I remember you didn't want to treat, and I was like, okay, I'll treat, And they were basically, the women were like my clientele. So we end up like, it was nothing for me. I'm like, okay, normal ops, We have to talk about marriage. We have to talk about kids. And then somewhere in between, I've got to do something to your back, So, but I do remember that, and I do remember seeing so much potential at that, because I'm kind of like Eric. I'm like, what is, like, this is a thing, like these people, it's a thing. And there was so much potential to bring all the elements to that area. But what's interesting to me is that you've redesigned it so well, because what people do is they get locked into, well, this is my opinion, that people, I think, let me just say physical therapists. A lot of physical therapists are validated by being the fixer. I mean, I was for many, many years. I mean, I did manual therapy on the spine when people's backs are hurting and you can fix it and they get off the table and they're almost wanting to like genuflect to you. That's a really good feeling, It's a really good feeling. But to be able to say, I don't want them to be dependent on me. I want them to be living their best selves, and be able to redesign that, to me, takes a very self-aware person, because you can still make a lot of money with them being dependent on you. But you have to be very creative to make money and them not be dependent on you. So now you find yourself both supporting the health of the community as well as competing. Like, so what does EQFit look like now when you go to a show? So
Yeah,
did we
good question.
we just missed the Congress? Has the Congress been? The Congress has been.
The Congress passed, and we didn't go this year. Honestly, there's another show in Ocala, and just for, the horses that we have now, and kind of that was a better fit for us this year. But yeah, it looks quite different. Like at a horse show, I still pretty much always have my treatment table. I still try to make sure that I either have a license or compact license in, the state that we're going to. But it's really much more focused on relationship building with my clients. Sometimes we'll lead a pop-up workout. I never charge anymore for like group fitness done on site at a horse show. It's more just the EQFit community getting together to work out in person, because we don't get to do that a lot. And then intermittent treatment. Like I might see a person on, I try to focus on my show days, not really seeing anyone, so I can focus on my performance and not get distracted. But, maybe on non-show days, I'll see 2 people that are my ongoing clients, more people that I have built a relationship with, that I know exactly, what they need and what they don't, so that they can feel their best for their show day. But, a lot of our community now is a combination of either youth equestrian athletes, or like amateur and select amateur, which amateurs are anyone that are non-professionals, that are, over 18, and then select amateurs of 50 and over, non-professional population. But yeah, it's a lot less intensive at the horse shows.
So it sounds to me, I'm just because people are going to want details and logistics, and it's probably also natural in your head. So it sounds to me now you're using the shows as a touch point, but because you're virtual and they're on memberships and you're training virtually, it's like you're not charging a lot of stuff at the show, because it's just a way for you to give them a hug. You're doing great. Look how you've realized that in order for them to, well, not realize, you designed and you help them realize if you want to perform well at the show, it's not about me fixing your back. It's about the fact that we've been together for the whole year. Yes.
Totally. Another, I guess, honestly, probably the biggest thing I do at shows now is a trainer. This has now been 2 years ago, but a trainer helped me to really launch this idea of an EQFit assessment. So it's kind of taking the PT world and the riding world and then my strength and conditioning background all together, and being able to evaluate a rider in the saddle. Based on that, look at things like on the table and kind of movement patterns to figure out what are some of like what's causing some of the deficits in the saddle, and then create them an exercise plan that they can complete independently with kind of monthly follow-ups. And we're going to tweak the plan here, we're going to progress your plan here. And so a lot of times at the shows, it's simply just reassessing those things that we found that we wanted to make improvements on, and touching base with their trainer. Hey, what are you seeing in the saddle? Go out and watch them ride. Ooh, that's way better, but this is not better. Okay, we need to go back to the drawing board on their plan. So yeah, it's exactly that mindset of, whereas before those same clients may have seen me at the show like, oh, I need you to fix me so that I can feel good to show. Now it's like, hey, let's kind of check our progress so I can stay working between the shows. So I'm ready to go.
No, so that's scale in a nutshell. So had you not done the first one in the way that you thought you needed to do it, based on what we've been trained to do as physical therapists, and then, but you had some sort of feeling like this isn't going to work. I'm going to end up hating this, like a clinic, a traditional clinic. And then you begin to try to scale, because I think that's the hardest part, is how do you scale and still provide the level of service that you want to provide and still walk the journey with the client that you're working with. That's fabulous. That's
Yeah, and I
fabulous.
think to that point, like one of the things that's happened in the past year is one of the previous proactivity employees that worked at base camp long before I was there, Stephanie Gentile, she was an equestrian and still is an equestrian. She's a high level reiner, which is just a slightly different world than mine. And as I was, as EQFit's been growing in the virtual space, we now have group workouts that happen multiple different times a week. I wanted to not be like, I wanted to scale it. I wanted to take a step back from being the service provider and really be able to evolve the systems so that EQFit can continue to grow. And so, Eric was like, well, what about, we used to have this employee Steph and she was awesome. She's the right mindset. I think she rides horses. Like there's always pictures of horses on Facebook. I don't know what she does, So I talked to her. It was just a good fit. And now for probably the past 6 to 8 months, Steph has been a vital member of the team. She coaches she's, my partner in it. And so it's, I think to your point, like we get stuck in the scaling of like, well, how do I move from like, it's my baby. Like I want to control every little thing. I want to make sure that the experience, but that is almost always in our head. Our youth group doesn't care if I show up to coach or if Steph shows up to coach. It's me who's the one who had to get over that feeling of like, well, it has to be me, right? But you can't grow that way. You can't scale. The way that you grow and scale is by evolving the system such that the experience is great no matter who's in the driver's seat.
Yeah. So here you are scaling. So what your first scale was, okay, this isn't successful. I'm burned out. To this is successful. I have to let go. Like, you know what I mean? Those are two vastly different scales,
Right.
One would argue the second one's a little bit more difficult because in the first one, when you're like, this sucks, I got to change
this
it.
isn't fun anymore.
This isn't fun. And then, but the second one is, oh, this is mine. I've got to scale. But it won't be successful unless you do that. Okay, my last question, then we'll wrap up, or not really question, but kind of if you could elaborate, is I always say that we as human beings are always embedded in populations. Like we don't have to go look for populations, and that if someone, to your point about taking the CERT course, if someone wants to like go into the employer setting, that's great, fine, well, and good. But the principles that you've learned can be applied into your current population. So when I think about myself as a woman, the populations I have been embedded in, I have been embedded in a mother's population, a military spouse's population, a midlife woman's population. Like those are populations of PTA population. I mean, those are the populations that I embed myself in and or have across my seasons. And I see the elements everywhere. So no matter where I am in my life, I see the elements everywhere. And so I just want you to maybe help membership understand that if they want to do something, how did just to that whole embracing the population that you already knew, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a good point. And the more probably the past 5 intro courses that we've put on, that's like my challenge at the end is find the population you're already in. Don't think about oh, I have to go pitch the biggest employer in town, or I've got to, find some community nonprofit organization that's going to get my vision. Right. Start with the populations you have. To your point, they are all around us. We are all embedded in populations because we're humans and we're social driven creatures. So, if you looked at a snapshot of my week, you'd be like, what the heck does Allie do? Because it's so many different things, but it's all the same stuff. It's finding a population that needs what we have to offer, embedding in that population and deploying the elements on them, right? So whether it's my mom who lives in a community that's largely, my mom and dad live in a community that's largely older adults, and putting on a strength and conditioning program for them. That's a population that needs an element move, right? Or whether it's the equestrian athletes, or whether it's one of our employer clients, or whether it's the gym that you go to that maybe has a need that you can fill, or whether, it's your, the school organization that you're a part of, parent, like we are all embedded in these little big or micro populations, and you don't have to have it figured out to just start there, whether it's, I think I have went through the struggle of trying to start with populations because I thought they would work or there was a need, but they weren't my populations. Like I'll never forget one of my first things. Golfing is huge here. So I was going to start a golf program. I don't know anything about golf. I have zero relationships in the golf community. I was going to meet with all these golf pros and literally had zero interest, zero signups. And I was just like, okay, but, and I never really let those things like hold me down or like get bummed out about them. But, in reflecting back, it's like, well, that, of course it didn't work. That wasn't my population.
Yes, you didn't, like whether you knew it or not, they were like, she didn't even have our language, you know what I mean?
Yeah, she didn't even know where to park when she pulled in the country club. Like, yeah.
Yeah, and don't you think we do that as providers? We're like, well, I know the musculoskeletal system. Let me put on my cape because I can solve all your problems. But I think to your point, it's culture. Like it's your what do you have that's common with them? That is hysterical, Allie. I did not know that.
Right. Yeah. It's funny. It's totally language. I mean, most of the equestrians that I work with, like they probably could give, I can't think of I'm trying not to curse, but they could care less. Like if I, about necessarily like nobody has asked me like my, where I got my degree or what certifications I have or whatever. Like they don't care about that stuff. They care about that I can say like, well, I noticed that you're like, you twist a little bit more when you do a right to left lead change than you do left to right. So I'm wondering, that I can speak their language that's relevant to them and that they feel understood and heard.
Yes.
Because I think working with your population, the reason that's so powerful is because most people have not had an interaction with a health or medical professional that they feel heard or understood. So the second that you can see, like, I see you, I get what you do, and I'm here for you, that's why people, spend their money with you. That's why people become faithful like followers of you, not because you gave them the best exercise or best most appropriate clinical diagnosis and treatment. Like it's about feeling heard and feeling like you value and understand their needs.
Yeah. And even if you don't solve their problem right away, they are confident that because you understand their problem that you'll figure it out. So at that point, they're not looking to you necessarily to have all the answers. They're looking for a troubleshoot partner with their health journey, like that they're just going to collaborate with and do. That's great. That's super. Okay. Any last thoughts for membership as they embark on any new projects in a population?
I just think it's like not getting bogged down. One, I think it's like understanding that it's hard work. Like, I think it's easy for people to look and be like, oh, I am not happy in my clinical life, but understanding that like, just because something, I love what I do, but it's incredibly challenging and it took tremendous amount of hard work and many months of, wondering if it was going to work before anything happened, so like recognizing that and not getting discouraged by that. And really just like trying to connect with the population or populations that you feel like you understand or that have a problem big enough that it's worth it for you to try to build an understanding. And I think, yeah, the biggest thing in population health is not getting discouraged, because there's no playbook, there's no,
Right.
CPG on how to do this or what to expect. Like, it's a constant evolution, it's a constant reformatting and going back to the drawing board. So just not getting discouraged by that, not viewing things as failures if they don't work, just an opportunity for redirection.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Thank you, Allie.
No problem.